Today's shiur begins 8 lines from the top of Daf Pei Beis. You'll notice a bow tie shape, and also you might notice a number 2. We're, of course, continuing the marking scheme that we saw in the during our previous shiur. These are the stories and cases involving a yavam that has brothers, and the yavam is interested in going ahead with the yibum. The brothers are threatening to thwart the yibum. It seems from the Gemara that with the yibum being prevented, they will then also share in the deceased brother's estate. With the yibum going ahead, they will get nothing. They will not receive any portion of the deceased brother's estate. The yavam, on the other hand, as we said, the brother that wants to do the yibum, often referred to as the eldest of the surviving brothers, upon whom is the primary fulfillment of the mitzvah, he wants to do the mitzvah. So, as we learned in the previous Gemara, they are threatening to thwart the yibum by giving her a get, which rabbinically speaking would prevent the yibum from taking place, and the brother who wants to do the yibum is making a counter offer, and we'll see that in the Gemara. On the side of the Gemara, we have a nosei klali, a general topic heading, haknoas nechosim le'acherim, the transfer, the selling of properties to others, even though they're not currently in the possession of the one who wants to give it. It almost sounds like the old cliched remark of selling the Brooklyn Bridge. They're selling something that you don't have. That's the general theme that we'll be seeing here. Let us turn to the Gemara. Hahu gavra denoflo le yavama b'masa mechasya. A yavama, a woman became a widow in the town of Mechasya. Bo achva lemifsala begita minei. Another of the surviving brothers wanted to prevent the yibum, to void the yibum from taking place. Lemifsala means to render her unfit for yibum by giving her a get, a divorce document. Let me read that again. Bo achva lemifsala begita minei. He wanted to passel her from the yavam, from doing yibum, through a get. Omar lay, the brother, the eldest brother that wanted to do the yibum, my daitoch, he says to the other brothers, what's on your mind? Is it because you're interested in getting a portion of the nechosim of the estate? Meaning that if yibum doesn't take place, so then we will all share in the deceased estate. And is that what you're interested in? I'll give you a portion. I'll give you a portion of the estate. I'll give you a portion of the estate as if the yibum wouldn't take place. I'll give you that amount, whatever you would have received. So that if the estate was worth $1,000, and there's myself and there's you, and if yibum doesn't take place, each one would get $500. Technically, when the yibum takes place, I'm supposed to get the full $1,000. Don't worry about it. I'll give you $500 anyway. So you have an offer of the yavam, very similar to the case we had in our previous shiur, where the Yavama in Pumpadisa. Omar lay, so the brother says, Mistafino, I'm afraid, the Avdisli kida Ovid Pumpadisa Ramo, that you're going to do to me the same thing as the trickster in Pumpadisa. A reference to the previous story where we had learned that the yavam didn't actually have to give properties to the brother to whom he made that offer. Tosfos elaborates on this a bit, and he points out that in that story back on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Beis, that yavam had made the offer, but he backed out. And I'm afraid you're going to do that to me. Omar lay. So the Yavam says, don't be afraid. I boyas, if you want, poloig loch mehashta. I'll give you the properties from right now. Rashi, polog mehashta, hachazek bechelkecha, take hold of your portion me'achshav, from right now. V'afapi she'eno achshav knuyoloch ad she'echnois o she'echlok, even though it's not going to be yours until I do the yibum, or until I divide it out. The she'echnois v'ezke bekulan, when I do the yibum and am zoche and merit and inherit everything, zechei ato bechelkecha al pi shechzakticha me'achshav, you will get your portion based on my giving it to you from right now. Omar Mor Baravashi. So upon hearing this offer, the consolation of, don't worry, you're not going to lose out because I'm giving it to you from right now. So you don't have to worry about like the case in Pumbedisa where the guy made an offer and later on he backed out. There's no backing out because I'm giving it to you. I'm giving your portion to you from right now. So Omar Mor Baravashi. Afagav the Chiosur Avdimi. Now here we have a marking that is used to highlight Chiosur Avdimi and later Chiosur Ravin. Before we go further in the Gemara, though, let us just review the point by looking at our topic heading. Ha'im yesh lahashvois. We've written on the side under the nosei, are we to compare bein Yavam Shomar Liochiv, a Yavam that says to his brother, Hachzek bechelkecha shebenichsei achi hameis lifnei sha'ayabeim v'tikne me'achshav, take hold of your anticipated portion in the deceased brother's properties before I do the yibum and thereby acquire it from now. The mikre shel, to a second case, we compare that to another case called that reads as follows: Mishoch parazu v'tikne liachar shloishim yom. Do an act of kinyan, an act of acquisition, which when you're dealing with a para, cow, that means draw the cow to you, and through that gain acquisition 30 days from now. In other words, do an act now. The realization, the fulfillment of that act won't be until 30 days later. So are these parallel ideas? The Yavam making his offer to his brother, do a kinyan now and acquire it later, to the case of the cow case that we just mentioned. Are they parallel? So now we continue in the Gemara. Afagav, we're at the first diamond, the Chiosur Rav Dimi Omar Rabbi Yochanan. Even though Rabbi Yochanan through Rav Dimi is reported as having said, Hoimer lechavero, Leichu mishoch parazu velotia knuya loch elo leachar shloishim yom. Go and draw this cow. It's my cow, and it will not be yours until 30 days from now. Leachar shloishim yom kana v'afilu oimedes be'agam. 30 days from now, it takes hold. The action you do now will realize its fulfillment 30 days from now, even if the cow, even if the cow is not is out in the fields, it's not in the domain of the purchaser at all, or it's not in the receiver's domain, it still works. That purchaser, that acquirer, gets it. So even though that works, still, here with the Yavam, it's not going to work. Hasam biyodo. The reason that it works in the case of the cow, we'll call the delayed reaction kinyan works. That's because biyodo, the entire transfer could have taken place immediately. There was the potential for it being an immediate transfer. It was the cow owner owned his cow at that point. They made a deal that let the fulfillment, the consummation of the deal take place a month from now, but the potential for it having been clinched immediately was there. Hacha, in the case of the Yavam who hasn't married her yet, who is simply trying to thwart to stop his brother's efforts from stopping the Yibum, it wasn't the property of the Yavam yet to make deals over it. So it really was like trying to sell the Brooklyn Bridge. The Gemara asks this is a technical question. This is the Haki also Ravin's version of Rabbi Yochanan is different than Rav Dimi's version of Rabbi Yochanan. Ravin's version goes even further. He says, Lo kani, in that case of the cow, delayed reaction does not work. Lo kashya, that isn't the problem. Ha di'amarle kni me'achshav, ha delo amarle kni me'achshav. It depends on how the deal was phrased in the cow case. If in the cow case he says, make a kinyan on it now, and you'll acquire it from now in 30 days. Sounds a little bit legalese, but it makes a big difference. If you say kni me'achshav, so then the kinyan that was done is effective, and it will become his in 30 days. What Ravin was quoting concerning Rabbi Yochanan is where the word me'achshav was not added in the deal. So you don't see any recognition of the immediate act of having any significance. It's all delayed, so then it won't work. Structurally speaking, we should point out that we have brackets right before the second diamond to indicate that the main point was said, namely that the offer made by the Yavam of Plog Loch Mehashta doesn't work, because he was trying to make a deal with his brother on something that he himself, the Yavam himself, had no control over at that point. Ravin isn't arguing with that whatsoever. In fact, he's only strengthening it. But all that Ravin's purpose here in the Gemara was to highlight what we said was a contradiction within the rulings of Rabbi Yochanan, and hence we wanted to, we'll say, de-emphasize that in order to make the point that the Yavam's offer was not a halachically valid offer. We continue in the Gemara. Ba'u minei me'ula. A question was asked of Ula. Yibeim v'achar kachilek mahu. We have the case before with the brothers trying to stop the Yavam from going ahead and doing Yibum. What would be if the Yavam actually went ahead and married her and then divided out the properties? Namely, the issue that we raised before is not germane over here, because before we were arguing the Yavam was dealing with things that he wasn't in control of. Here he married her. He then, at that point, he inherits the deceased brother. After inheriting the deceased brother, he then divides out his properties. Does that take hold? So that was the question asked of Ula. Lo also v'lo klum. Ula says it doesn't get off the ground. The reason, again, that doesn't get off the ground is based on information we've learned before, and that the properties of the Yavam, the properties of the deceased brother are not, it's not to be divided out. They're all bound toward the ksuba of the Yavama. Another question. Chilek v'achar kach yibei mahu. This question is just like the case we saw above. What about if before doing the Yibum he tries to divide it out? What would be? Response, lo asa v'lo klum. Now, the order of these questions seems to be illogical. In other words, let's go on in the Gemara, if it isn't already clear. Maskiful Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes asks, Hashto yibeim v'achachilek losav lo klum. Mind you, in a case that the Yavam already did the Yibum, he already became the heir, the owner of his deceased brother's properties, and you say that his dividing out of it doesn't work. It doesn't work, even though he is the owner of those properties. He's not entitled to divide them out. Do I have to tell you that in the case of Chilek, where he first divides out and only afterwards marries, that it's lo also v'lo klum, that it's meaningless? That's so obvious. The Gemara says, yes, you're right, it's so obvious. However, the question that was posed to Ula were not two questions, one right after the other. Shnei maisim havu. They were actual, we call halacha l'maisa questions that were brought to Ula on two separate occasions. And the second question was chilek v'achakach yibeim, but Rashi points out that that questioner did not hear about the first case. They weren't asked together in the Beis Medrash, so he was coming without any background and asking his question of chilek v'achakach yibeim. Had the issue been, let's say, the subject of some type of academic discussion, as Rashi says, a discussion legirsa bi'alma, so of course, if the first point had been mentioned, so there would be no room for discussing the second point. Ki also rovin, Omar Reish Lakish. Bein yibeim v'achakach chilek, bein chilek v'achakach yibeim, Loi asa v'lo klum. We didn't point out before, but you see the house marking on the side of the Gemara under the Nosei Mivneh. We indicate Deos she'omros she'ein chiluk bein yibum yibeim v'achachilek lebein chilek ulebesof yibeim b'shneim lo kona. Both Ula and Reish Lakish reflect the same ideas. The Gemara rules v'hilchasa lo asa v'lo klum, and the Gemara itself rules thusly that the attempts of the Yavam to distribute properties of the deceased from the deceased estate to other brothers, that does not work. V'chachomim omrim peiros hamechuborim lakarka shelo. We saw in the Mishnah, according to the Chachomim, that if the deceased had left property with fruits attached to the ground, so those attached fruits, shelo, they belong to the Yavam. Amai, I don't understand. Why should it belong to the Yavam? Why should he be able to do with that whatever he wants? All of the properties of the deceased are bound, serve as a guarantee for the Yavamas, for the Almonas Ksuba. And we add, very importantly, that which is attached to the ground is like the ground itself. So just like the ground itself, the karka itself is something that is bound to the Ksuba, and it's not considered the Yavam's own property to do whatever he wants, so too the fruits attached to the ground. Omar Reish Lakish, Tani Shelah. You should restate it as reading it belongs to her. And now Rashi adds, Tani Shelah, V'lo pligi Rabbanon olei. There's no argument between the Rabbanon and the other Tana in the Mishnah regarding Peres HaMechuborim, Elo Atlushin V'aksofim, only with regard to detached fruits and cash. Ulameimar delo mishabdi metatli ksuba, and their position being unlike that of Rabbi Meir, that the cash and portables are not bound to the ksuba. But here we're not dealing with portables; we're dealing with vegetation that is still attached to the original plant or the tree. We continue with a quote from the Mishnah, but before we do that, we just glance at the side of the Gemara with a nosei, topic heading, Konsa la Yavama, the Yavam marries the Yavama, Harehi ki ishto. The Mishnah tells us that she is like a wife And what does that mean? Megarsha beget. It means that if he should want to leave her, he would divorce her with a standard divorce document, as any husband divorces his wife. And umachzira, and if he should so desire, he could remarry her at a subsequent point in time. The Gemara. Konsa harehi ki-ishto. When the Yavam marries her, we saw this in the Mishnah. The Mishnah back on Pei Omid Beis. When he takes her in, when he marries her, she becomes like his wife. Lemai hilchasa. Regarding what do we mean? She becomes like his wife. I say like his wife. It doesn't mean that she's not the real wife. She's a real wife, like meaning like a regular man marrying a woman. Regarding what do we mean? Omar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina lo yimar. 2 points. Shemegar shebeget. That if he should want to divorce her, he would divorce her with a get. And umachzira. And if he should want to take her back later on after divorcing her, he could do that. The Gemara is now going to analyze these 2 points, which they seem to be very obvious. The Gemara says, Megarsha beget pshita. Divorcing her, if you want to divorce her, of course, how else are you going to divorce her other than with a get? So the Gemara explains what I would have thought without the Mishnah. Mahu detema v'yibma omar rachmona. The pasuk is in Devarim, Perek Chav Hey, pasuk Hey. We have it quoted on the side of the Gemara, the lower part of the page, the relevant words of the pasuk. Yivama yavo yoleo ulekacha loy leisha v'yivma. So the pasuk used the word v'yivma. I might have thought v'yivma amar rachmana. The rachmana is the Torah. The Torah says v'yivma. V'adayin yibumin harishonim oleha lo tiski lo beget elo b'chalitza. When you marry the Yavama, one might have thought that the Yavam or Yavama status remains on her. How does one set free a Yavama to marry someone else? That's through the Chalitza ceremony. So I might have thought that after a Yava marries her, she's still considered a Yavama, and Chalitza would be necessary. Komash Malon, the Mishnah tells us by being taken in marriage, she becomes like a regular wife. Now, as far as, so if she becomes like a regular, what am I going to do with the word v'yivma? So Rashi tells us that in Maseches Yevamas, we learn from that word v'yivma means that it can be done even bal korch, even against her will, she can be taken in marriage, in a yibum marriage. We continue. Machzira pshita. Once you tell me that she could be divorced, so he could take her back. Isn't that obvious? The Gemara explains what I would have thought without the Mishnah and Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina's explanation. What would I have thought? Mahu detem, we're at the top of Omid Beis. I would have thought mitzvah de Rama Rachmana Olei Avda. The mitzvah that the Torah, Rachmana is the Torah, Rama means placed upon the man. Avda. He did the mitzvah. He married her. V'hashta tekum oleo be'isur eshes ach. So once he married her, he did the mitzvah. He divorces her. Okay, the mitzvah's finished. Now she represents the widow, the wife of his brother. And in the Torah there are many different forbidden women. And one of the different forbidden women, one of the arayas, is called Eishes Ach. So once he did the mitzvah, he then divorced her, her original status would reemerge. Kol mashmalon, by the Mishnah saying Harei ki ishto and machzira, and the explanation of that he could take her back, just like any husband who divorces his wife can take her back provided she doesn't marry someone else in the interim. So too over here, he's allowed to take her back. Again, when we say he's allowed to take her back, and she doesn't have any status of Eishes Ach. Why not say, yeah, that's right, that when he divorces her, she regains her original Eishes Ach status. Omar Kra, the Pasuk says, Ulekacha lo leisha. Kevon shelokcha nasis kishta. Once he takes her, she becomes like his wife. So all the rules of regular husband and wife apply here. And just like in regular husband and wife, if husband divorces wife and wants to take her back, wants to machzir her, so too over here. Another quote from the Mishnah, and we indicate on the side that this Omid is going to be dealing with Hezber Protei Mishnah. Details that were mentioned in the Mishnah are now going to be explained. It said in the Mishnah, Bilvad shetei Kesubos al nichsei bailo rishon. The Yavama relationship is a regular husband and wife relationship. However, the Ksuba, the financial guarantee that a wife has, is going to be, in this case, backed up by the properties of the first husband. My taima, why do we say that her ksuba is based on his properties and not the Yavam's own properties? The Gemara answers, Isha hiknu lo min hashamayim. This wife was imposed upon him from heaven. In other words, this is not a marriage that he initiated totally on his own. It was through the laws of the Torah that she was imposed on him. And therefore, we can't expect of him to also guarantee her ksuba through his own property. V'i less law merushan. If the first husband had no estate, he had no properties, he left nothing. Is law misheni, then she does have a ksuba guarantee from the second husband's properties. Kedei shelote kala bi'enov lotzia, so as not to be too easy for him to divorce her. What do we mean by that? If you're telling me that the deceased brother doesn't have any property, and if you were to say that her whole ksuba was based only on the deceased brother's properties, and there's none of that, she marries the Yavam, and if you tell me he wouldn't be bound to pay her ksuba from his own properties, so then he could, one day, as soon as she gets a little angry, he could just divorce her without feeling any pain in divorcing her, any financial pain in divorcing her. Therefore, we say that if there's no property from the first husband, you're going to have to pay out of pocket if you should want to divorce her, thereby making it such that it's not kala be'enov lotz. It's not so easy for him to divorce her. Lo yoimar lo harei ksubosech. We saw in the Mishnah you shouldn't say to her your ksubas munachas al shulchan, and it went on to say in the Mishnah v'chein lo yomar odem lish harei ksubosech munachas. My v'chein. What does the Mishnah intend when it says and likewise with one's own wife? Would one think that the way one deals with one's wife is any less than the way we would deal with one's yivama? So mahu de tema, I might have thought as follows: Hasam, in the case of a yivama, Hasam hu de lo kosav law de kanoi u de kanina. In the case of a yibum marriage, the yavam doesn't write a ksuba. In the ksuba text, it says that I am duty bound to your ksuba from properties that I have kanoi, means I've already acquired, and any properties I acquire in the future. That gives a very strong sense of security in a marriage. When the yavama is married to the yavam, that the yavam doesn't write that. He doesn't write a ksuba. Now, with the regular wife, avol hocha, but in the case of a regular wife, the kosav law, the kanoi, the kanina, where he writes in the ksuba document any properties that I've acquired and any things that I will acquire. Emo samcha daita. I might think that even if he were to earmark portables as the payment of her ksuba, she still would have a sense of security, a sense of reliance that she will be cared for, that she doesn't. I dare say it seems to me that even if the portables that he earmarks to get lost, she still knows that any properties that he acquires in the future will be bound to her ksuba. So that in the case of a wife, let him earmark the ksuba or designate portables as payment to her ksuba and put them on the table and say, here is your ksuba. Komash Malon. So we're telling you that even in the case of a regular wife, where you see the expression where he writes ksuba, the kanoyu de kanina, still he should not do that. There's a detail that Rashi adds in the Havamina of the Gemara, namely, in the case of the Yavama, where he doesn't write the kanoi u'de kanina, if the Yavam were to designate portables and put them on the table, that's going to create a sense of enmity, of ava, because she doesn't have any source of, let's say, backup or security. What would happen if what he designates now as my ksuba, what if it gets lost? Where will I have my guarantee, my finances from? But in the case of a regular wife, where he does add the guarantee of kanoi u'de kanina, I might have thought that there he could designate portables and put them on the table and say, this is your ksuba. So Komashmon, the Mishnah comes to tell us he shouldn't do that even in the case of a regular wife. We saw in the Mishnah Gersha, Ein lo ela ksubasa. When the Yavam divorces her, so then all she has is the ksuba. The Gemara continues, Gersha in, if he divorces her, then all she has claim to is the ksuba, and if the Yavam wants to sell the properties from his brother's estate after that, he can do so. In other words, after the Gerushin, after she receives her ksuba, then the brother can sell. But we can infer from that, lo Gersha lo. If he doesn't divorce her, then he cannot sell any of his brother's properties. Komash malon kederevi abba. This Mishnah then supports or teaches like the teaching of Rebbe Abba. Rebbe Abba, we saw at the end of Daf Pei Aleph, Omid Aleph, at the bottom part of the page, where Rebbe Abba had been asked, a brother, a Yavam that wants to sell from his deceased brother's estate, what options does he have? And there Rebbe Abba taught the only option he has would be to divorce her. And if he wants to take her back later, fine. But all he can do is to divorce her. At that point, he would then pay the ksuba to the Yavama, and then he would be free to do with his brother's estate whatever he wants. Because at that point, the obligation of the properties toward the ksuba is no longer a factor. The Gemara continues, Hichzira harehi kechol hanoshim ve'ein lo elo ksubasa. As we said, if the Yavam decides to divorce her, so be it. And then he can take her back, and when he takes her back, she is like any other woman, and all she has, as far as claims against him, is the ksuba. The Gemara asks, Ichzira maiko mashmalon, the Mishnah that says that he takes her back, she's like any other woman. What is our Mishnah telling me? Tanina, we've learned this elsewhere. Why the repeat in Mishnayos? It says Hamagarish so ishu machzira, one who divorces his wife and then takes her back. Almanas ksuba rishona machzira. He's taking her back with the intention that her ksuba is going to be the original ksuba. What this teaches us, what this means, is that when a man divorces his wife and then takes her back, let's assume in the interim he had not actually paid the ksuba to her. So when he takes her back, it's almanas ksuba rishona machzira. He's taking her back with the intent that the original ksuba that he owed her is that which she receives now. In other words, it's that same ksuba that applies to her now. It's not that he writes up a new ksuba with we'll call like double dipping. She gets another twice the amount. So our question is, why do we need our Mishnah to tell us that point when it's already been taught there in the Mishnah later on in Daf Pei Tes? The Gemara answers, Mahu detema. Had I had just that source, which spoke about Megarish's Ishto, I would have thought, Ishto hu deihu kosav lo ksuba minei. In the case of a regular man and wife situation, the ksuba that she had was a ksuba that this husband, that he himself had written for her. Avol yavimtoi, delo ihu kosav lo. In the case of a yavama, her ksuba is from the deceased first husband, the deceased brother's obligation, and he had written the ksuba. So in the case of the yavama, the yavam is not writing a ksuba. The ksuba is based on the property of the first husband. Hecha de girsha v'hadra, where the yavam divorces her and takes her back. Ema ksubasa minei. I had reason to think that the yavam himself should now write up his own ksuba. Kamash Malon, the Mishnah tells us that if the yavama is taken back after being divorced, it all goes back to the way it was originally, that her ksuba is based on the properties that the yavam inherited from his brother. Amar of Yehuda, Barishona hayu kaisvin lebesula masayim l'amana mana. Before we go on, we should just glance at the side. We have a topic heading, the nosei, which reads, Barishona nichse habal lo hayu mishubadin l'ksuba. Originally, the properties of a husband were not bound toward the ksuba. Until, in the course of time, it became necessary, and the rabbis enacted that all of a person's properties are bound to the ksuba. So now we go in the Gemara. Amar of Yehuda, Barishona hayu kaisvin lebesula masayim u'la'amona mona. Originally, a person, when marrying a woman, if he's marrying a widow, he would write mona 100 zuz, and marrying a virgin, he would write that he owes her 200 zuz toward her ksuba. And let me add, and they would not mishabed they wouldn't have all of their property serving as a guarantee toward that. Women then, as women today, concern themselves with their financial welfare. And they were figuring, who says I'm ever going to get paid? So as a result of that fear of entering a marriage and all of their income going to their husbands, and what guarantee do they have that that if he decides to divorce her, she becomes a widow, she'll have any financial guarantee? So women would not enter marriage. That's maskinim. They would become old, and men would not marry women because women would not want to get married. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says. Omru, the women figured him, continuing in Rashi, the Chishiyamu so Yagaresh, if he dies or he divorces me, lo nimtza ligvos klum, I won't have anything to collect from. Shayorshim yatzniu mo'is shel Yerusha. The heirs, whatever cash he may have left over, they'll take the cash and hide it. I'll have no guarantee. we can say parenthetically that when it comes to portables, we saw a machlokes between Reb Meir and the Chachamim whether portables are bound toward a ksuba. And the part of the underlying issue there is people don't rely on portables. They're here today, gone tomorrow. They can, as Rashi says, they can be hidden. So the people can't be expected to rely on them for their collection of debts or collection of things owed to them. So that's what the situation used to be. We continue in the Gemara. Ad sheba Shimon ben Shetach, until Shimon ben Shetach came along. Now he was a leading authority in the early Tanaic period, in the time that the Beis Hamikdash was still extant. V'tikein, he came and established Kol Nechosav Achroyin L'Ksubasa, that all of a man's properties are bound toward the ksuba. So women would then have a sense of security that whatever property the husband leaves, she has first claim to it up till the amount of her ksuba. Tanya Nami Hachim. We have a Tanaic source that spells all of this out. Barishona hayu kaisvin l'psula mosayim l'mona mona. That was what we already saw. Now here's an interim stage which we didn't see. Hiskinu, they saw that people were just delaying in marriage. They weren't getting married at all. So Hiskinu shiumanifim oiso beveis aviha. They established that the amount of the ksuba, it might be in cash or valuables that correspond to the value of the ksuba, would be placed in her father's home. However, this wasn't a foolproof solution to preserving marriages. V'adayin, and still, okay, women might get married, but still, shukayei soleha, omer la lechi eitzel ksubasech. So, though the women would be, we'll say, motivated to get married because of the sense of financial security in knowing that the valuables are over there in her father's house, there's still another problem that when the husband flips his lid or becomes irate and intolerant, he can just very easily tell her, you know what? Your ksuba is already available. It's for easy taking. Go home. In other words, he divorces her, sends her home. Go to your ksuba in your father's house. So with this interim solution, still it became a little too convenient for an angry husband to divorce his wife, knowing that the ksuba has already been allocated or earmarked, designated. So they established that it should be in the ksuba is, again, it's identified, it's designated, and kept in the husband's house. So that this idea of sending her home to her father, that isn't going to play a role, because the ksuba is not by her father's house, according to this later takona. Ashiros oisois oiso kalsus shel kesef v'shel zov. When it came to wealthy couples, so the ksuba would be in the form of either silver or gold baskets, something of value, and the value of that vessel would correspond to the amount of her ksuba. Anios, when it came to impoverished couples, hayu oisois oiso ovid shel meimei raglayim. It was made into another kind of another type of vessel. This is a vessel that's used for one's relieving of one's own physical needs. Urinates into this vessel, so that would be a vessel that had value that would correspond to her ksuba, but still a problem. Vadayin. And still, when the husband would get angry at her, Omerla, take your ksuba, which has already been designated, and go out, go away. Ad sheba Shimon ben Shetach v'tikein sheyeh kaisev la kol nechosai achroyin l'ksubasa, until Rav Shimon Shitach came along and established this clause to be included in the ksuba. And Rashi adds, at this point, he wouldn't identify something as her ksuba. This we saw, a reflection of this we saw in the Mishnah, that he shouldn't put on the table valuables and say this is your ksuba. So there was no more practice of designating things toward her ksuba. Rather, all of his property was bound to the ksuba, and that would serve as a type of deterrent for him. Even though he may be angry, deterrent for him to divorce her. As you can see, we've come to the end of the 8th parak. Mirz Hashem, in our next shiur, we'll, with Siyata Dishmaya, begin the 9th parak.